Hey everyone, Duke here, and today we are going over how to solo and solo flawless the Warlord's Rune Dungeon. I'm going to be going over some specific tips for each encounter, as well as some builds and playstyles that you can use to make things easier for all classes, while still trying to keep this video concise and under 10 minutes in total. We're trying to keep this concise, so let's get right into it. To start off, there are two mods I'd recommend no matter your class and no matter your build. First is Solo Operative. As you'll be solo, you're going to get 15% bonus damage throughout this entire dungeon with everything. And second will be From Whence You Came. This is going to give you an additional 5% ability damage to all the Taken and Scorn, and that's all you're facing in this dungeon. Now, if you're running solar weapons, which a lot of what I recommend is going to be that, you're going to have mods like Kindling Trigger, Flint Striker, Torch, Revitalizing Blast for solar subclasses, and Argent Ordnance for rockets and potentially solar rockets are all going to be beneficial, as well as Rays of Precision, again with Solar Precision Final Blows, allowing you to add clear better, and again, you have multiple ways to get Radiant, whether or not you're on a solar subclass through this artifact. After your artifact mods, the next thing you're going to need to do is pick your subclass. Banner of War Titan is going to obviously be a super strong option, as many people already know, but basically what you want to do is find a class and subclass that allows you to have some sort of a survivability loop. Whether that be something like Banner of War, whether that be something like any solar subclass, especially when using Healing Grenade in order to allow you to start Restoration, and it's even better on Warlock as you can get ×2 Restoration with Healing Grenade, but then pairing that with Ember of Empyrean will allow you to continuously extend the Restoration that you can acquire by using solar weapons. Again, even another reason to potentially build into solar weapons along with the artifact. Do note that you can also be using Ember of Mercy as a fragment on solar subclasses. Just keep in mind that picking up the fire sprites and granting yourself restoration with them is going to be resetting your restoration. This is a bug that's been a thing for a while, but if you have, 10 plus seconds built up through your Ember of Empyrean, and then you pick up a fire sprite with Ember of Mercy, that's going to lower you back down to only 2 or 3 seconds, so that can potentially kind of mess you up in some cases. It can still be useful just to have another way to get your restoration started, but it does require a lot more kind of focus and making sure and paying attention to the actual timer that you have if you are going to use this one. Now for armor setup and things that I would use, again, no matter what class or subclass or weapons that you are running. First is Heavy Ammo Finder. This is going to allow you to get even more heavy drops when you're getting kills, especially if you're running an exotic primary, which we'll talk about in a second. I'd recommend a Siphon if you're using Solar Weapon, Solar Siphon, whatever your main primary weapon is, you want to have a Siphon for that. This is going to be the best way to create orbs now, as they've nerfed some of the other kind of ability-focused ways to get orbs. Siphons are still great. Multi-kills, you're making orbs constantly. Really easy way to make orbs here. Next, I would definitely recommend 100 Resilience throughout this dungeon, as that's going to allow you to be as survivable as possible, as you definitely want to be that way, especially for solo, and even more so for flawless, obviously. And to pair with that, your chess piece mods on resistances are going to make you even tankier. The first boss, you really want to have solar resistance. The final boss, you really want to have void resistance. The middle boss, you can probably go with either void or arc, depending on if you want to be defending against some of the snipers or some of the eyeballs. Kind of a mix, but definitely solar on first boss and void on last boss, and we'll talk about that when we get to each encounter as well. For boot mods, I'd personally recommend this exact setup, Recuperation, as one mod in order, so all those orbs you're going to be making with a Siphon, they're basically just creating health packs for you. Every time you pick up an orb, you're going to get a big chunk of health back, and that's going to help you no matter what build you're running. If you don't have another way, if you don't have your restoration going, if your Banner of War is down, etc., you're going to have another way to heal. Next, I'd really recommend Solar Scavenger, especially on some of the encounters. If you're going to be using rockets, which is what I used, it's going to allow you to basically double your ammo economy every time you're picking up those ammo bricks, especially the ammo finder bricks. It goes from 1 to 2, super helpful. And finally, we have a space here for a solar weapon surge. This is going to be the most effective single surge that we can use. If we ran 2 or if we ran 3, that could allow us to do even more damage from surges, but this one is going to give us 10% right off the bat, so we're going to use 1, again, pairing that with Scavenger and Recuperation. Technically, you could try to hot swap before going to damage phases and stuff like that. I didn't personally do that, but it is an option. I'd also consider all void subclasses to be very strong options for this dungeon. Again, you lose a little bit of value due to these artifact being so solar focused, but between Echo of Starvation allowing you to get Devour on a single orb pickup, again with some of the mods that you can have for orb generation, such as Siphons as we just talked about, that's going to give you Devour, instantly heal you to full, as well as potentially giving you the option to get more kills and keep Devour proccing, as well as Finisher Final Blows granting invisibility through Echo of Obscurity. Again, I think Invis is extremely strong for survival. Obviously, Hunters can do that throughout just through different actual normal gameplay, but having the finishers on top of that, both for hunters or for other classes, are very useful as well. My weapon setup throughout the dungeon was pretty straightforward, and I didn't change too much. I ran Riptide the entire time. I really like just having that flexibility for being able to kill a reasonably tanky target, or also use this on these scoring mini-bosses in multiple encounters in order to help take those down a little bit easier. There's a lot of great options. You can potentially use a shotgun if you want to be a little bit closer range. You can potentially use a sniper, or even something like Izanagi's Burden to increase your damage potential and just overall ammo that you can really do some high damage with. Again, plenty of options. I liked Fusion here. Only two primaries that I use the entire time. I use Zalu's Bane, and I use Sunshot. Sunshot is absolutely nuts this season. It's incredibly good. Again, pairing an exotic primary with Heavy Ammo Finder allows you to get even more heavy drops. Zalu's Bane, to me, is kind of just like a mini Sunshot. So for the first encounter, when I ran Lament, which, spoilers, that's what I ran for the first encounter here, I put on Zalu's Bane. For the rest of the dungeon, when I was not using another exotic, I went ahead and ran Sunshot. Insane ad clear. Pairs so well with the artifact mods. Pairs so well with the rest of the build. Gets even more ammo drops. Really, really useful. Again, you can run what you want. I would personally recommend solar weapons just because they do help so much with some of the artifact mods that we talked about earlier, but not a hard and fast requirement whatsoever. Again, though, if you are running solar classes and being reliant on Ember of Empyrean, then it is kind of a hard and fast requirement to run some sort of solar weapon that can allow you to continuously extend your restoration. And finally, as we just mentioned, I ran Lament in the first encounter as a sword. I also really, really like Apex Predator, potentially even in the first encounter, but I ran this throughout the rest of the dungeon. I did actually run my Reconstruction bait and switch version of Apex Predator when I did my solo and solo flawless runs. I feel like after running it, I would highly recommend personally Explosive Light instead. It just felt kind of awkward, especially with how safe I was playing, which we'll talk about in a minute. I felt like bait and switch, I wasn't necessarily getting as much value as I probably could have or would have otherwise, but either one, some sort of rocket. Again, solar is helpful. Reconstruction I really, really like, and just in terms of being able to get 2 shots off and then kind of be able to maneuver in between while waiting for that second reload in. A lot of great options. Personally, for the second encounter on the Ogre, Dragon's Breath is a super, very, very, very good and strong option. I just haven't ran it a lot. I'm not very comfortable with it, and that's, again, to me, there's no one tried and true, you have to run this method to do this dungeon solar, anything in the game really. I'd always recommend running something you are comfortable with. Obviously have a reason you're running it and have like a build kind of around it a little bit and have, do something that's pretty strong in what you're doing, but I'd recommend, doing something you're comfortable with over being like the absolute best option. I do feel like Dragon's Breath is very strong and probably the best option for doing damage during the Ogre, especially with how much it can kind of keep him off of you and push him back, and it makes that part a lot safer and can also kind of clear some of the ads potentially too. But again, for me, wasn't comfortable with it, so I ran Apex instead. Also want to talk about a couple exotics really quick. I ended up just running Hoyle and not really caring too much, just having more uptime on my abilities and my melees and my grapple and stuff. But Precious Scars is a super duper strong option if you're using the same weapon as your subclass. If you're running something like Sunshot on Solar, you're going to be able to just get constant restoration. Pretty much every kill you're getting, there's a small cooldown. But then again, if you pair that with Empyrean, now boom, you just have literally just like infinite restoration. It's insane. Again, you don't even have to do that on Solar. You could be running this on Void with a Void weapon. You could be running this on Strand with a Strand weapon, Arc on Arc, whatever you want to do. But just keep this in mind, a super strong option this season. And Warlocks have a similarly strong option with Karnstein Armlets. Again, you can run this on any subclass of your choosing. Every melee that you get is going to give you restoration. Any finisher you get is going to give you restoration × 2, which is extremely strong. Again, if you pair this with Empyrean on a Solar subclass, gives you another way to get your restoration started. Even if you're not running on a Solar subclass, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all your weapons or your subclass here. It's your melees and your finishers that are getting it started. And again, if you're mailing enough stuff, you can keep it going. If you get some finishers from time to time, you can keep it going. So you can use this on any subclass of your choice. It's just going to be a little bit even more beneficial probably on Solar, again, even more so pairing with the artifact. And Hunters don't have a new or updated exotic, but they do have Assassin's Cowl, which definitely opens up even more options for survivability and even moves Arc up to a very potentially strong and survivable option for Hunters specifically. Again, more on the melee and finisher side in terms of being able to get yourself healing and invisibility through this exotic. You don't have the way to it's not actually restoration that you're getting here, you're just getting straight healing, so you can't really pair it with like Solar with Empyrean, but again, another strong survivable option for an exotic here. So I've got a couple quick tips for the first encounter. First of all, you want to use any downtime you can to clear ads. You want to not have like a million ads shooting you if at all possible and whenever possible, because that's going to, obviously give you a much higher threat of dying. When you do get teleported, you can use the radar a bit actually to kind of help you find the eyeballs that are going to be shooting you. Obviously, there's also the enemies below you that are going to be showing up on the radar, but it can at least potentially block off ways that the eyeballs aren't, and which can definitely help you find them a little bit easier. If you're lucky and are able to get the overlapping little scorn lanterns like I do here, being able to get both of them for a damage phase is obviously super beneficial. You can get a longer damage phase, but definitely in most cases, if they're not overlapping, do not even worry about getting two. It's really, really not going to be easy in most cases, and it's not really a huge difference. Again, the big thing with solo is you really want to just take your time, and like if you have to do an extra phase, you have to do an extra 2 phases. It doesn't matter. Just as long as you don't die, there's no enrage, there's no anything that's going to like force you to have to do it in a speedier way or in a faster way. So definitely you want to play safer rather than not. And again, in most cases, if they're not either really close to each other or just overlapping, you're not really going to have the time to get both anyway. So just focus on getting one. The other thing you can definitely do during this first encounter is if you're ever in a bad spot, like let's say there's a lot of ads up or you don't have a super that, if you're using like well or something and you want to be focused on, having your super every time, you don't have to actually do damage. Like when you break out of the cages, you can just go ahead and not even do a damage phase. Like, and in that case, if you're not going to do the damage phase, I would recommend not even being on the lamps at all, because there's no reason to be, and that's not going to hurt you in any way. Like there's no negative that happens. You don't have to actually do the you don't have to do the lanterns. You don't have to do a damage phase every time. Nothing's going to happen. It'll just spawn another wave of ads, and in a few seconds you'll be able to go up, get teleported into the cages again, and then get another chance next time to potentially go for the damage phase when you're set up a little bit more. Obviously, another option potentially if you're running low on ammo or have no ammo for heavy, another good reason that you may want to do this. Now for the second encounter, you're going to need to either be playing the left side or the right side of the map, and I'd actually recommend the left side being a little bit faster. However, I've played the right side 98% of the runs that I've done in this encounter, and so again, going back to what I talked about earlier, I'd recommend doing things you're more comfortable with. The other thing you can do on right side that helps a little bit is playing back at that kind of second wall where you saw that I was playing just a second ago. It'll tend to make the mini boss Scorn move up a little bit more before he throws that first lantern, which is definitely helpful. So you can try to get both of them kind of stacked up on top of each other like I do here. Sometimes he does like to throw the lanterns off the map or kind of like in the ground on this side. That's the reason I do like the left side better, for being able to get both lanterns more consistently. But the positive is if you don't get both, it's okay. You only need to get 4 eventually, but you can keep redoing it as many times as you can, as many times as you'd like to. And for me, what I did is I just kind of stayed here until I got all 4 orbs into the center. So you actually don't even need to worry about it. Like you can just kind of stay here. I didn't actually do all the orbs until I got all 4. And if you didn't know, these orbs never despawn until you pick them up, and then you have 15 seconds to dunk them. So again, that kind of gives you that extra benefit of you don't have to run through the middle like multiple times and then go back and then run through the middle again, go back. I just went ahead and did it all in one phase here, and kind of then took that chance to like clear as many ads as I could and then start doing all the dunks. Do note that you can kill some of these eyeballs during this phase. I'd recommend not killing all of them, because that's going to spawn in the square and mini bosses and start the cold phase again, and you'll have to worry about that. You don't really want to do that, but you can at least kill some of them. I tried to kill kind of more of like the middle ones-ish, as those that I feel like were the ones that were shooting me the most. The ones on kind of the outskirts wouldn't always be shooting me. The right one, if I'm on the left side of the map, it wouldn't be shooting me, or the left on the right. But you definitely can shoot some of them just so there's not so many shooting you. And then again, trying to kind of keep these ads down in between. Helpful whether if you're running something like Restoration, if you're running something like Devour, if you're running like Banner of War like I am here. It's keeping your healing going and keeping your stacks up kind of in between while you're doing the running. So again, another good reason to kind of do them all at once. It kind of allows me to, get a dunk in, get a few kills to keep the healing going, get another dunk in, and kind of just rotate through all at once rather than doing them one by one and then having to go back and do another square mini boss later. Now, once we got to the final dunk, I was very safe here. I made sure to like keep ads down. I played it very safe in terms of just if the boss got close to me, I would definitely not want to shoot my rockets too much. I went ahead and like killed ads for as much as I needed to feel like there was nothing alive. So like you definitely can do this. You can definitely get more damage out than I was, but I was playing it very, very safely, very, very carefully. The other thing here too, though, doing this is you do have a 60-second total amount of damage, right? You have 4 pillars, 15 seconds each. So even if you have to skip one damage phase, I mean, pretty much that one there, I pretty much skipped that entire pillar of damage phase. But if you're doing rockets, or if you're doing pretty much anything, you're probably going to get all, or at least 99% of your heavy out when doing damage in this encounter. So like you don't actually like have to like maximize the first couple pillars. Here I also go ahead and kind of loop around to A, pick up an orb, B, pick up the heavy, and it's also kind of allowed the ogre to like chase me around so he wasn't so close to me onto this pillar. That was also something I was kind of experimenting with in terms of doing like almost like a zigzag rotation to make it so that the ogre wasn't chasing me so hard and was a little bit further away from me when I was trying to shoot my rockets. Again, like I talked about earlier, Dragon's Breath is a good option to just not have to worry about that at all, but I wasn't super comfortable with it. So just keep that in mind. You have different options to kind of play it safe, and again, if you have to do more phases, if you're not doing as much damage per phase, it's no big deal. You can go ahead and just play it slow, play it safe, and you're good to go. Also note here, I do have a quick little swap you can do if you have a reserves chest piece and you have a lot of extra heavy around, which if you're running scouts, or I'm sorry, if you're running finder and running an exotic primary especially, you should have plenty of heavy in between rounds. It allows you to go into the actual DPS phases with a couple extra shots. You can switch to your reserve chest piece and then switch back to your tankier chest piece immediately. And one final note I wanted to make is right after the imminent wish timer runs out, or, right after you do the Scorn mini-boss phase, there's always going to be 2 Scorn snipers that spawn, and they tend to just go underground and teleport right next to you, as they do here. I would highly recommend waiting for and killing these every single round, and when you're actually going to go for the dunks, make sure that you go over to the other side and kill the ones over there as well. You could technically, go and kill them every round if you really wanted to, but you definitely want to at least make sure they are dead before you start your damage phases, because you do not want to have snipers shooting you in the back while you're on, each of these pillars. And finally, let's talk about the last encounter. Here, every round, you're going to have the 2 wizards in the middle. You're going to want to focus on those first, just because you don't want them running around and potentially melting you. And I find that the right side of the map for all 3 encounters is kind of the most comfortable for me. Again, that's where I normally run it, just doing the encounters normally, but it does also give a good amount of cover. Also note that you're not going to need to necessarily shoot all of the little, like, taken blights that are on the ground, but definitely take down any of the ones that are near you. If you try to just keep shooting all of them, they're going to keep respawning, and I kind of eventually through this encounter started shooting less of them just because I realized that. I was like, okay, they're spawning too often, I'm spending too much time shooting these, and I'm never actually getting to damage phases. So just focus on the ones that are nearest to you. But again, you can absolutely take your time going to damage phases. If you need ammo, go ahead and just kind of sit back, let more of the Taken spawn in before you actually shoot all the eyeballs, and wait for this encounter is completely kind of on your own pacing and your own time, so you can take things really, really, really chill until you're ready to go. Here you definitely can spawn and get 2 of the Scorn lanterns pretty much every time, as long as you let that first one spawn and then you kill the Scorn mini boss right on top of it. After it spawns the first one, you can get 2 and you can get that longer damage phase. You definitely want to try to get 2 every time, because a single one only gives you like 5 seconds to do damage, which is not a lot. And for me, every single damage phase, I was playing extremely carefully. Like, I was killing all the ads that spawn in at the start of the damage phase, like every single time. So that definitely cuts into even more of the damage phase if you're going to play like that. I definitely, again, I think it's worthwhile. Do note that at any time you can go backwards platforms to either go get ammo or go get safe. You can even wait for supers if you wanted to before pushing forward, or if you needed to use your super for some reason. You could always just run away and hide on a previous platform so you're not even anywhere near the enemies if you wanted to. Again, it's going to slow it down quite a bit, but just giving options for anyone that again, in situations you may need it. I also really liked using my barricade to blind these dudes when punching them. Obviously, that's a Titan-only thing, but hunters can kind of, if you're going to run Void, you can either use the slam down on Void, or you can use potentially throwing knives, or again, Warlocks have ranged melees on pretty much every class. I mean, most classes have some sort of ranged melee, so you have some sort of way to kind of take advantage when going ahead and going for the melee to transfer the debuff. Then once you do transfer it, make sure you play safe from there because they can punch you back and potentially transfer the buff back to you, and you don't want that to happen right at the last second and kill you. So if you get up on a high ground, again, there's high ground on pretty much every single platform, you can use that to your advantage. Now, when pushing up for the kind of 3 platform section, I went ahead and tried to get any ammo or orbs that I could get right before the damage phase so that I would have armor charge as well as, obviously, ammo. And I also tried to go pretty quickly so that I would still have my Banner of War. And again, this would work similarly if you were running Restoration or anything like that as well, so that while I'm kind of killing the eyeballs in between phases, I could be continuously stacking that healing as much as I possibly could. If things do get hairy, obviously you can pop your supers. It obviously depends on what super you're running. If you're running something like Well or Tether, a one-off super, that's one thing. If you're running a Banner of War Titan like I am, obviously it's going to be a little bit harder to use. You can technically go up and melee him. That seems a little scary to me personally, but you can also use like the ranged melee on it as well to get a little bit of damage off. And I do use it later, and actually in specifically Final Stand, which we'll talk about in just a second, in order to get that extra tankiness. Don't forget that on any sort of longer use super, that you get that extra survivability and extra kind of tankiness when you are using it and when you're in it. So definitely keep that in mind as well. And lastly, just kind of using the pillars on every single platform can be useful, and kind of rotating back and forth between shooting the eyes, as the eyes are going to be able to do a lot of damage to you. Kind of see me bouncing back and forth using the pillar as cover, shooting the eyes as much as I can, and that's going to keep you alive while also being able to do damage in between. Again, that's where I do like having some sort of auto reloading weapons so that I can be doing damage kind of afterwards. After I kill those eyes, I pull out my heavy, and I have a couple shots, specifically 2 for reconstruction, that I can shoot at the boss when I want to get some damage off. And lastly, we have Final Stand. I've heard that you can actually run away here and just kind of shoot the boss from a super safe distance. To me, that felt a little cheap. This wasn't something I was interested in. Again, do what you want to do for yourself, but for me, I want to do it in a way that feels good to me, so I didn't do that. But I do use the pillar as much as I possibly can as cover, and it kind of keeps cover from the entire right side of eyes, and I can shoot those left side of eyes constantly as they're coming in. I would recommend, if you can go into this phase with as much ammo as you can, and potentially also your super, that's going to make things a little bit easier and safer for you. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if you do ever get into a little bit of a pinch, as I do here in a second, I'm kind of out of heavy, and it's really, really close, I'm just kind of playing safe, I don't want to throw at this last second, and then I get a little bit chunked by the boss, I just pop my super and finish him off. Again, that gives me that extra survivability, and just makes me feel a lot safer in terms of being able to finish him off with these last couple hits. And that's all for today. I hope this video to soloing the Warlord's Rune Dungeon was helpful, and we definitely went a lot longer than 10 minutes, so I'm sorry for that, but I do think that this was very concise in terms of giving just constantly useful information, so I hope it was helpful. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.